and welcome to Lip Service, a podcast that adventures around and around and all down the line with the Rolling Stones. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Simon Harper, and I shall be your host for this series of conversations that celebrate the life and music of the greatest rock and roll band in the world. We've got sights and sounds and marvels to delight your eyes and ears, so join us as we journey down the road of peace, from Dartford days to Hackney Diamonds and beyond, exploring the songs and stories from along the way with friends and special guests. Today's guest is Chris Kimsey, the renowned recording engineer and producer who worked alongside the Rolling Stones for over 2 decades, helping to shape some of the most significant records across one of the most commercially powerful stretches of their career. Chris first met the Stones while assisting the producer Glyn Johns after starting work at Olympic Studios in southwest London, aged just 16 in 1967, then engineered sessions there for Sticky Fingers in 1971. Later stepping into the role of producer, he steered the group's late 70s reinvention through Some Girls, Emotional Rescue, Tattoo You and Undercover, culminating in the triumphant return to form with Steel Wheels in 1989. Away from the Stones, throughout his career, Chris has engineered or produced some of the biggest names in music, including Led Zeppelin, Peter Frampton, Jimmy Cliff, Killing Joke, Duran Duran and INXS, building a discography that is a testament to the trust placed in his ears and instincts. For this episode, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Chris in the hallowed rooms of Olympic Studios itself, where so many classic Stones songs were born, and where Chris often works today, having recently designed the renovated cinema and studios within. In our conversation, Chris takes us inside the control room to share insights into the making of these classic albums, from the intimate punk-influenced sessions in Paris to the cinematic clarity of Steel Wheels. We find out how he used a razor blade to carve radio hits out of 19-minute jams, the secrets behind the 3-month vault search that gave us Tattoo You, and what gets served at a Keith Richards barbecue. This is the final episode of Season 1 of Lip Service. All 12 episodes are now available to stream and enjoy. If you followed the series, please like, comment and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and ensures these stories continue to be heard. So now, let's sit down at Olympic Studios with Chris Kimsey. Chris, welcome to Lip Service.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be in Olympic Studios. This place is full of history. So
it is indeed. If these walls could speak, but I have to speak for them, I'm afraid.
Well, you know this place very well, right? You've been here.
Yeah, I started here in 1967. 66, 67. I was 16 and a half years old. And the place had only been open for barely a year, which I didn't know when I started work here. But I was very lucky to get a job here and started as an assistant engineer. And I remember the first day that I walked in, that I was told to go up to Studio One, introduce yourself to the engineer, sit down quietly and observe. Well, I walked into the control room and the engineer looked at me and he said, "Hi," he said, "do you work here?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Take over." He said, "The assistant's gone sick." So fortunately I knew how to work a tape recorder, albeit a stereo one, but this was 8-track. So I took over the session. It was only like a 45-minute session, jingle session, doing a TV commercial. And at the end of it, the engineer, who was a wonderful man called Alan O'Duffy, who worked with the Stones, worked with many, many great artists. Alan said to me, he said, "Thank you very much, Chris." He said, "How long have you worked here?" I said, "Well, about 45 minutes now." It was quite a jump in the deep end, but it just seemed to be a natural thing for me. So, yeah, I've got a lot of fond memories of Olympic, from the 60s through to when Virgin bought the building, and then EMI bought the building. And then I got involved with the new owners, Stephen and Lisa Burge, who bought it, I think it was maybe 15, 16 years ago. They're not in the music business, they're in film and graphic design, but they always wanted a cinema, so they're in the cinema business, they're in the film trailer business and graphic art for posters. We met up quite by accident, and we became very good friends, and they asked me to come on board as like the historian. They didn't know anything about what had gone on here before, pretty much, apart from the big names, but I was the link to that, and then I helped design the cinema sound Then it was always part of their business plan to put a studio back in Olympic.
Yeah.
And so it's taken about 6-7 years to get it organised, but it's almost finished, and I think next year we will be open.
Starting again?
Starting again, exactly. We've had some live music events up here which have been really successful, so we'll be doing live music, more likely streaming that to the cinemas as well. So yeah, it's a wonderful building.
It really is. It's full of history.
It's full of history, but it was a theatre in 1906. It was built as a theatre. It had the first car park for horse and carriages, so people from London would come over Hammersmith Bridge, park up their horse and carriage and come to the theatre here. And then after the First World War, it became a black and white silent movie house. Mm-hmm. So it's gone back to that part of its heritage in a way.
Well, I was going to say it's always been designed for audio, but silent movies not so much.
No, exactly. So it was silent movie, and then after the First World War, it was a black and white movie, with sound, theatre, and yeah. So now back as cinemas. But also a recording studio, so it's quite special.
Well, you said that you'd had experience with a tape machine, so when you started here, it wasn't just an entry-level job, it was something you intended to go in that direction?
No, I had no idea. When I think I must have been about 11 or 12, and for some reason my parents, one Christmas, gave me a tape recorder. And we're a working class family. I mean, it wasn't. I think it might have fallen off the back of a lorry. I think that's what most of the presents used to do back then. But and I was just completely fascinated by this piece of machinery. First of all, it came with some pre-recorded tapes, and it was like Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole. Musicals like The Sound of Music and The King and I. So I got really absorbed by listening to that music, which that kind of stirred up my passion for music. And I was learning piano at the same time. So I had this little tape recorder, and so I knew the basic functions of how to record, which I loved recording any noise I could. I found it fascinating to be able to collect sounds on magnetic tape. And then at school, when I got to my secondary school, the head of drama found out I had a tape recorder, so I was always called in to do like the sound effects or the music for the school plays. So it was a combination of that. Oh, and the school also had a very deep history. It was part of one of the buildings was a hospital for the Crimean War, so there was quite a history to that building. And we did a Son et Lumiere production one year, so I was involved with that. So I was always like the go-to kid with a tape recorder at school. So
you had a curiosity for sound from the off, really.
It was amazing. I mean, really incredible. And then when I left school, I didn't go on to further education, and I happened to I had a girlfriend who lived around the corner from Olympic, so every week I'd pop in and say, have you got any jobs? I didn't know what was in here. Mm-hmm. I just knew it said sound studios, recording studios. For about a month they said, no, go away, go. And they eventually took my phone number. And then I was just about to start a job as a supermarket fitter, because a friend of mine owned a company that did that, and travelling around the UK fitting out supermarkets. And all of a sudden Olympic called up and said, can you come in for an interview? So I came in for the interview. I met Keith Grant, the owner builder of Olympic, and he said, well, we'll let you know in a week's time. And unfortunately, about a week later, they called up and said, can you start on Monday, £11 a week? So that was it. I was here.
Well, supermarkets' losses, Olympics gain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the world of music's gain as well. So, but it's been an incredible journey. I mean, yeah, it's really quite magical, and to be back in this building again, where it all started for me, is quite special.
You mentioned Keith Grant there.
Yes.
You've previously called him a strict disciplinarian.
So I wonder what the work environment was like then when you first came on board.
Who called him a strict disciplinarian?
You did.
Did I?
I did my research.
No, that was Glyn Johns for sure. Glyn was a strict disciplinarian, but Keith was very laid back actually. But I suppose in a sense he trained everyone to be really ready for anything that might happen during a session, because we were doing a lot of big film sessions. We did the soundtrack for the Italian Job with Quincy Jones. We did the Thomas Crown Affair, the original Thomas Crown Affair with Faye Dunaway and Steve McQueen. That was Michel Legrand composing, conducting. We did Get Carter with Stephen Budd. I was on all of these albums. And then later Yentl with Barbra Streisand, and so the whole work ethic from Keith was you have to be really prepared for anything that might happen. So that meaning is setting up the studio, that you always had other microphones available in case one would go down. You just had to be really prepared. So and even with recording bands as well, any type of recording, if you're ready for anything, then no problems really occur. They don't slow the session down. That I teach the students today, because that's been lost in the art of recording. I mean, you turn up at a recording studio now, and you might have to sit around for 2 hours while they set up, because they don't have the foresight to set up. So I always make sure, I say I'm starting at 10. You need to get there at 8:30 and set everything up.
Yeah.
And also I give them the plot so they know what they got to set up. Yeah, but it's being back in this building is quite special.
So how did your role evolve into you became an engineer?
Yes.
How did you become that from starting as the T-boy?
Well, T-boy to assistant engineer. So I was assisting on a lot of records for about a year and a half, daytime sessions, which was all to do with orchestral sessions or things like Shirley Bassey, big rhythm section recording. No bands, nothing like that. They always came in the evening. From like 7 until about 2 in the morning. And then after about a year and a half of doing those sessions, orchestral sessions, I was asked if I would like to do some overtime and do some of the evening sessions. So yeah. I said, well, sure. If it's going to help me get a bit more than £11 a week, I'll do it. So, and then Glyn had been working here quite a bit, and Glyn Johns. Anna Menzies, who's the studio manager, she said, I'm going to put you on a Glyn session. So I didn't know who Glyn was really, but the other assistant engineers who had worked with him said, you better be very careful with Glyn. He suffers no fools, and you better know what you're doing. So I kind of studied his setup, and the first session I worked with him, everything was set up, microphones tested, everything, all the positions that he likes, and he just came in and pushed the faders up and it was all working. And we kind of hit it off really, really well. He asked me to be on most of his sessions after that. So I was working with like Steve Miller's The Eagles, The Who, Humble Pie, Delaney and Bonnie, Eric Clapton, Joan Armatrading, Gallagher and Lyle. It was quite amazing working with Glyn, and we're very good friends to this day. Yeah. We have huge respect for each other, actually. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. Then what happened after that is that I was assisting on a Johnny Hallyday album, The French Star, who's like the Elvis Presley of France. And it was the first day of making this album, and the engineer, we were all house engineers then. We weren't freelance engineers. We were all house engineers. The engineer didn't get on with the French. So he told me at the end of the first day, he said, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I'm going to call in sick. So when we came in the next day, no engineers. So the producers said, well, who are we going to use? So they were asking the management here, and they said, well, would you consider, working with Chris? You seemed to like him yesterday, and we think he can do it. So that was it. I jumped in the hot seat, and I was engineering Johnny Hallyday. I went on to engineer 7 albums, producing Johnny as well. We became very, very good friends. Very good friends indeed, actually. I actually helped him put his live band together for quite a few tours. Did some incredible live recording at the Stade de France. That whole experience was magical. But that first session, those first sessions with Johnny, that first album, it had musicians like Mickey Jones, who went on to be Foreigner, Klaus Voormann, bass player with the Beatles, Ringo was on it, Peter Frampton was on it, Gary Wright from Spooky Tooth, who wrote Dreamweaver, Hugh McCracken, guitar player from the States. It had these really amazing collective of musicians, and that was Lee Halliday, the producer. He would always put together a crack team of musicians. So this is my first real recording session, and working with these great musicians. And quite interestingly enough, because my background musically was not in the rock or pop arena, it was more musicals, film music, that type of music. I wasn't enamored, the fact they were huge stars didn't have any effect on me. To me, they were, great musicians. That was it. And that's always been, my kind of keystone feeling about working with musicians. So after working with Johnny on that album, I became very, very good friends with Peter Frampton, because we were, quite a similar age. I think Peter's maybe a year older than I am. So, and he was at the stage where he was going to leave Humble Pie and start his own solo career. And after Johnny's album, not long after that, he asked me if I would engineer his first solo album and be associate producer on it. So that's how that friendship started.
Yeah, very quick evolution, wasn't it?
Yeah, really. And then I just became just very popular engineering here. With 10 years after, that was a great relationship too with Alvin. I miss him terribly. And also working with people like Madeleine Bell, Doris Troy. Yeah. Huge. Cat Stevens as well. That was a magical album. Mona Bone Jackon. That was his first solo album away from like the pop star, the pop area. Working with Paul Samuel Smith on that was magical. Oh, so many wonderful bands and musicians, and so it was the Halliday sessions that gave me the big break. But at the same time, I was still doing some assisting. So that's when I first met the Stones. Actually, the first time I met the Stones was in Get Your Ya-Ya's Out, because Glyn was mixing that here, and I was assistant on that. And I remember Glyn was late one day, or was sick, and I had to take over just doing some playback. So that's when I got to kind of meet Keith for the first time. And then later, I was assistant on Sticky Fingers for those sessions that were recorded here. Although a lot of Sticky Fingers had been recorded in Muscle Shoals and other places, but it kind of all came back here to be mixed and final overdubs. I remember the first session with the Stones as assistant with Glyn. I was obviously the first one here, all set up, and from the control room to the doors into the studio, it's quite a distance. I remember seeing these two chaps walk in the door, like about 8 o'clock. Session was 7 o'clock call, and they walked in there like overcoats on and caps on, and they didn't look like musicians to me. So I called security and I said, "There's two people trying to get in. I don't know who they are, but I think you better come and escort them out." It was Bill and Charlie, and so that was my first meeting with Bill and Charlie, which was quite funny. And
I hope it improved from there.
It did, yes, it did. Yeah, I mean, I as I said, I wasn't enamoured by rock stars, but to try and have them thrown out as soon as they walk in wasn't a good plan. So and then. On those sessions, on the Sticky Fingers sessions, Glyn had worked on all their albums pretty much up until that point. Yeah. Sometimes he would be very late for sessions, or sometimes he couldn't get to the session, so I would step in as the engineer. So I was recording quite a few vocals with Mick. I remember recording the saxophone on Brown Sugar. No, I don't think I did any actual band recordings, although I did one evening was Keith's birthday party, and I was asked to engineer that. So I remember recording a version, I think it was Brown Sugar, went on for like 20 minutes, jammed.
Was that the one with Eric Clapton?
Eric Clapton,
came down,
yeah. So that was interesting. So that was really my first, and meeting Stu as well. That was really my first major contact with the band.
Well, Glyn had been working with the Stones earlier, and you were assistant engineer.
Yeah.
Previous to that, in the sort of early 60s, I suppose, along with your job evolving, I suppose the technology is evolving as well. It's probably different equipment from certainly the early 60s to the 70s.
Well, on Siggy Fingers, that was all on 8-track recording, and I think it was a wonderful format. Actually, sonically, it sounded great, and recording on 8-track really gave you a very good discipline of how to record, because you really had to figure out how you were going to utilise the tracks, what the artist wanted to do in terms of overdubs, and sometimes you would run out of tracks. You'd have to bounce from 8 bounce tracks down to another 8-track, it was a very good discipline. Which stood me in really good stead for later recordings. And then it went to 16-track and 24-track. Then you could have 2 24-track machines. Then you could have a 48 digital machine, and now you can have as many tracks as you want.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make the recording any better, having as many tracks as you want, because it really is about figuring out and committing really to what type of sound you want to get, how you want to record that sound. So instead of having 6 mics on one guitar amp, you pick the guitar amp, you pick the place where you want to put the mic, and you have 1 or 2 mics at the most on it. We never have 2 mics on a guitar amp back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So it's all about commitment and understanding what that means, and I think that's always been good for creating great sounding records, because it's more about collecting the sound rather than manipulating the sound.
You could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were doing all the sort of orchestral stuff in the day job, and you've got bands that you hadn't done before, was that quite a steep learning curve? Who was the first band you worked with, and how did you sort of learn how to put things in places?
The first band I worked as an assistant or an engineer?
Yeah.
As an assistant? Oh gosh, I'm not sure about that one. It might have been a band called Canterbury Glass, actually. They were produced by one of the owners of Olympic at that time, and they were like a prog rock band. I think I just applied microphone placement and choice from what I'd seen in setting up for Keith Grant, with rhythm sections. So just applied that. And also the great thing about all the engineers and assistant engineers at Olympic we were like a family. Very, very close. So they would share knowledge. It wasn't like, you have to, you should read about that. It wasn't anything like that. So it was very, very different atmosphere to maybe Abbey Road or CTS.
Well, were there any white coats here?
No white coats at all. No, exactly. No. We didn't have jack plugs hung around our neck either. No. It was the complete opposite to white coats. Actually, you could just wear what you wanted. It was very chilled. And
can you explain then exactly what the role of an assistant engineer is, or what an engineer would do in the studio?
So the assistant engineer would have to set up the studio, microphone placement, seating placement, everything.
So you're the first one in?
Yeah, first one in, and it's a lot to do, especially if you've got an 80-piece orchestra. A lot of microphones. You did have another, there was like a caretaker who would come and help as well. But it was mainly you as the assistant engineer, you were responsible for setting up the complete everything in the studio, so the engineer could just walk in and put the faders up and start recording. And then moving on to engineering, I would still do that because I had my own ways. But then I wouldn't have to operate the tape machines. The assistant would be doing that all the time. So in engineering, you're creating the sound in terms of choosing microphones placement, and also working with the artist or the producer to get what they want.
You said earlier that you didn't treat these artists as stars, but I also read that you didn't listen to much rock and roll anyway. So
no, I didn't.
I wondered if that kind of helped with a more objective
No,
point of view.
absolutely. The first record that I bought was Swingin' Safari by Burt Kaempfer because I loved the sound of it. The sound of it was amazing back then. I mean, I've still got that stereo album. It's
so you could go into the studio and you didn't care whether this was like the star guitarist or something. You'd make sure the mic was in the right place rather than treating them with any deference.
Exactly that. Yeah. So yeah, I think that always. I mean, I've seen other producers and people work with the Stones, and it kind of makes me laugh because they kind of sit there going, "Oh, that's Keith Richards out there." It's like, yeah, it's a guitar player. So,
Get on with your job.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, funny.
With someone like, I believe in sort of late '69, early '70, you worked with Led Zeppelin.
Yeah,
those are going to be difficult levels, right? Because these are musicians who play hard and heavy and loud.
Well, funny enough, not that loud in the studio, not as loud as you think. It's a bit of the whole drum sound thing. When people trying to emulate that years later, they actually overdo it. I mean, it was the fact that Jimmy and Glyn decided that they would put microphones high above the kit to capture the sound, to get more of the room sound. Than putting close mics. I mean, they did both, but that's where you got that heavy sound from. But Bonzo wasn't necessarily the heaviest player I've ever recorded. I mean, he was pretty full on. But I've worked with heavier drummers, in their attack, as opposed to Charlie, who was one of the lightest drummers in his touch. But sonically, that was great to record because you could get more sound into the microphone. When you've got someone playing so hard, the microphone becomes very limited and shuts down the sound. It becomes compressed. So, but the Zeppelin sessions were they were very special because I could see the relationship between Jimmy and Andy Johns. Actually, that's the sessions I was on. I was on Since I've Been Loving You, that track, which is one of my favourite Zeppelin tracks, actually. And it was interesting to see these, especially Jimmy and John Paul Jones, two highly, highly creative and great players. I mean, musically, just so knowledgeable about what they were doing, and that magic thing of having a great drummer behind you. It's the same with the Stones. I mean, Charlie brought so much to the Stones sound and to their groove. Yeah, the Zeppelin sessions were different to any other kind of sessions that I'd worked on up until then, pretty much. In terms of there was definitely a mood set in the studio. It was definitely a performance, as it were, as well.
Yeah, it's getting the right conditions to play in.
Yeah.
If every room sounds different and every location for recording will sound different, you mentioned about Sticky Fingers being recorded in different places.
Yeah.
When it came to your recording the sax or something,
yeah,
is there any concern about the cohesion of the sound? Have you got to make sure that it sounds, or is everything recorded just sound the same?
No, not really. It's more about getting the cohesion with the performance and making sure that fits the track that's going on. I mean, as a producer and engineer, in choosing studios where I wish to record, that's of high priority. I think I've only ever worked in one studio that I really didn't like because it was so dead, but it was my fault because I didn't go and check it out before. This was in a studio in Toulouse in France. It was just awful. I mean, I had to go out and buy like corrugated metal to put into the studio to liven it up because it was just so dead. It was awful. Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky you found it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Bobby Keys a little bit because he's a very larger-than-life personality.
Yeah.
What was it like recording him then?
Him and Jim Prime were amazing to record. I mean, they had such a thing together. And actually working with Bobby on the Stones, I think when I was working with Peter Frampton on his first solo album, he did a version of Jumping Jack Flash. Yeah, he did a version of Jumping Jack Flash, which is a great version. And because I'd been working with Bobby and Jim with the Stones, I said, maybe we should get Bobby and Jim in to do the horns on there. And what they did as an arrangement was outstanding, the two of them. I mean, double tracking and putting harmony parts on. Yeah, their ear was incredible, and Bobby's playing was sensational too.
You must have got on with him because you ended up engineering his album 2 years later,
I did.
right?
Yeah, 72. Exactly. Yeah.
Was he a fun guy?
Yeah, he was a fun guy.
That comes
absolutely.
across.
No, absolutely. Big heart. a lovely man. Yeah.
So were you present for any of the other Sticky Fingers songs? Because I know some of them were actually recorded here in full.
Remind me what's on there.
Well, I think Can't You Hear Me Knocking, Bitch and Dead Flowers.
Oh, yeah, Can't You Hear Me Knocking? Yeah, because that was Mick Taylor. Yeah, I remember recording that. Yeah, because it was, that was great, because I do remember, like, after in recording that track, so the song essentially was recorded, and then the band went into this jam at the end.
Yeah.
And that's when, you really hear Mick Taylor kind of let rip.
And was that as natural and spontaneous as we're led to believe?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it just went on into that section, which was fantastic. And then Wild Horses, that was for Muscle Shoals, I remember that. And Brown Sugar, I think we recorded that here. I can't remember, actually. And what else was on there? Was Moonlight Mile on there?
Yeah.
Okay, that was recorded at Mick's house in
Stargroves.
In Stargroves, yeah, and I went out to that session. That was on the Stones Mobile, I think. I remember being out there because Nicky Hopkins was on that.
And what's that recording sort of environment like?
That was just in like Mick's great hall, the big hall in the house. I mean, it was just set up, no real acoustic baffles or anything. It's just like a group of musicians all playing in one big room, and that's pretty much the Stones, the way the Stones recorded and should be recorded anyway. It's just in one room together.
Natural, yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy Miller was a producer on those sessions. Did you get along with him?
Yeah, Jimmy. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really get to know Jimmy that well, but I could see he really had a good connection with Glyn and the band, and also because he was a great drummer too. His sense of rhythm was really, good, and he would give some positive direction to the band for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned Peter Frampton earlier. You ended up recording the shows that became Frampton Comes Alive.
Yeah.
Biggest selling album of all time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was that odd, sort of being a live music recording?
No, not at all. I mean, I'd done quite a lot of live recording anyway, because when the Stones first built the Mobile, I think actually one of the first sessions was, funny enough, recording Johnny Halliday, but Glyn was recording it at the Palais des Sports in France. So, and then I went on later to record 10 years after, recorded live on the Stones Mobile as well. So recording live albums was great fun, actually. The Frampton Comes Alive, that was quite an interesting journey, because I'd done I think 3 solo albums with Peter up to that point, and then Peter still hadn't really become the superstar that everyone was kind of hoping for, and the record company, I think, were thinking, well, unless this next record makes it, I'm not sure what we're going to do. What can we do with Peter? That next record was that live album. Mm-hmm. So I only recorded 2 shows. I didn't record the Winterland shows, which were the main bulk of that album. Those shows were incredible to mix. As soon as you put up the audience faders, it was just quite, you get goosebumps, because the audience was so in tune with Peter, and they knew the lyrics to every song. It was fantastic. So when we came to mix that album at Electric Ladyland Studios in New York, there was Peter, myself and Bobby Mayo mixing it. Peter's manager at the time, Dee Anthony, said, we're just going to mix a single album. The record company don't want a double album. No one wants a double album. So we mixed a single album, and then Jerry Moss, the owner of A&M Records, came down to listen to it, and we played it to him, and he said, well, where's the rest? And we went, what do you mean? He said, well, it's got to be, you're missing half of the best songs. Where's the rest? So they got more funding, and we went back in and mixed the other album, as it were. So it was a double album.
But I suppose as a concert experience, concerts are an hour or more, and not just half an hour.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and Jerry knew all of Peter's songs, so he wanted to hear his favourite songs as well. So we went in and remixed, the other album, and then it became the huge success. But it's got such an atmosphere when you put that record on. It's quite unique what happened on that album. In terms, I noticed that most of the performances are a lot faster than the studio performances in the songs, which is
adrenaline, isn't it?
That's adrenaline, but Peter's playing was phenomenal on it, and always has been. I mean, he's still playing incredible today. I saw him at the Albert Hall a few years ago. It was just on fire. So, yeah, wonderful musician and a dear friend, yeah.
Did you have any idea? I mean, you said it sounded special when you were listening to it.
Yeah.
You surely couldn't have known how big it was going to be.
No, couldn't known it was going to be as big as that. No.
I mean, it was a game changer for him, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
It probably saved his career, like you said.
Yeah, definitely saved his career, but it almost didn't save his life, because he was just put out on the road so much, exhaustion, and after that album, it was a difficult time for him, and also the fact that he couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed.
Yeah,
it was like, I mean, Mick got around that very well when we worked in New York. Mick grew a beard,
yeah,
so nobody really noticed, him. But Mick was very good at dealing, with that attraction as well. I mean,
but then I suppose it was a bit more gradual. For Mick's
for Mick,
success.
Absolutely, yeah. For Pete, it was big, very big change.
Overnight, yeah. You mentioned right at the start of the interview that a lot of the bands you'd worked with, this was kind of in the mid-70s. You decided to go freelance.
Yeah,
it meant you could work with more people.
Yeah,
but I believe it could restrict where you could record as well.
Well, no, because I moved to New York. I actually moved. Well, the only reason I moved to New York, actually, because Peter, I was out there mixing Frampton Comes Alive, and then I had some I met with other artists over there. Became very good friends with Bill O'Coin, Kiss management, and I worked with Piper, with Billy Squire, worked with them. So I just found myself doing a lot of work in New York, so I just kind of moved over there for about 5 years.
You go where the work is.
Yeah, and I used to enjoy that. I mean, I've worked Montserrat. I spent a year in Jamaica, recording, producing Jimmy Cliff and Peter Tosh. I spent 5 years at Hansa in Berlin, Killing Joke Meridian, Joe Boxers and the Spear of Destiny, and where else? South of France with the Gypsy Kings, Ireland with the Chieftains. I haven't been to Iceland yet.
Still time, Chris.
Yep, still time, absolutely, yeah. A lot of different... and New Zealand with jazz, doing symphonic recordings with Jazz Coleman. That was great. And Australia with a band called Noiseworks in Sydney. Yeah, so it's which I really enjoyed doing, like the gypsy of recording, almost quite funny.
In the 70s, I believe it was, that you did your first production role. Was that a distinct shift between the jobs, or was it something you were almost doing anyway?
No, it was kind of something I was almost doing anyway, and it was more like artists were inviting me to be co-producer. They weren't giving me any points or anything, but I was getting the credit, which was great, because that helped, further my career. Yeah, I mean, so that role, and in fact, in later years, I stopped even engineering because I really enjoyed the role of the connectivity with the artists, getting into to really focus, so I didn't have to think too much about the recording. Although the recording part came very naturally to me, it wasn't like slowing me down. And the only reason I did that is because I kind of met this engineer at Maison Rouge Studios called Chris Potter, who was really, really exceptional, and it was like, he was doing things that I would do. It's all very natural for him. So we became good friends, and then I worked with Chris engineering a lot of records from there. Chris engineered Steel Wheels. We did that together, and a band called Diesel Park West, another band called the Escape Club.
In 1977, you're about to receive a phone call from Ian Stewart.
Ah, yes.
Inviting you to do some work. I believe he was a good friend of yours. What was Stu to you?
Well, Stu, I lived in a place called Banstead in Surrey, and Stu also lived in Banstead. He was just down the road. He lived kind of in a house on the golf course there. I didn't play golf, but just become quite good friends with Stu during the Sticky Fingers sessions. And also, he was really, really close with Glyn. I mean, Glyn and Stu used to room together.
Yeah.
Way back, so they were very tight, and I love Stu because Stu was just dead normal. It's like what we were talking about before. No, there wasn't any star thing about Stu, and he was very down to earth, which the band really needed and respected. He had the most amazing record collection of jazz as well and blues. Gosh, so we weren't close friends, but we were good friends. And I remember that I just got back from New York and decided to spend some time back in the UK. And literally, I think I might have been just finishing working with Peter actually on something. I don't know whether it was the Frampton Comes Alive album or the album after that. But I got back to London, and it was. I remember that I landed on Saturday morning. Got home, just about to start, chilling and unpacking, and Stu called in the afternoon. He said, "Chris," he said, "what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, well, I've just got back from New York, working out there. I'm looking forward to, having a bit of rest." He said, "Don't." He said, "Don't unpack. You're going to Paris on Monday with me." I said, "What do you mean I'm going to Paris on Monday with you?" He said, "You're coming to Paris and you're recording the next Stones album." I went, "Oh, okay, fine." So Stu turned up Monday morning in he had this really huge American, I think it was a Plymouth estate car. They were called Woodies because they had like wood detail on the rear end of them. Massive, great big thing, considering we're in the 70s in the UK, this giant gas guzzling beast. And he actually used it a lot to transport their amps as well. So we drove over to Paris and we went to see Pathy Marconi Studios, which was the studio that the band had selected, or Mick had selected to go to. It was, I think, Mick got a really good deal there because it was an EMI studio, and the band were on EMI at that time. Stu and I were shown to the studio, which the studio people actually called it their demo studio because it had a tiny control room. I mean, you could barely get 2 people in there. It was a very strange control room. It had a great EMI console, a TG1234, which was an incredible console at that time. And it was a big studio. I mean, bigger than Olympic number 1. Not as big as Abbey Road number 1, but it was big. We were put in that room because nobody liked to use it very much. They all wanted to work in the other larger studio, which had a Neve console a new Neve console. But Mick decided we should start off in this, what they call like the demo studio. Well, after being in there a week, I fell in love with the desk. The sound was amazing. And also the sound of the room was brilliant as well. I set the band up in like a semicircle with minimal screens, really. So it was like they were playing in a club almost. And I even put up a very small PA for Mick so that they didn't have to wear headphones all the time. They could hear, when they were routining songs, getting the format, getting the arrangement down, they could hear Mick singing. And in fact, on a lot of recordings that we ended up using, sometimes you could hear the ghost of where Mick might have changed the melody or changed the lyrics, the ghost of the old one in the headphones. You could hear a little bit, picking up on the drum mics generally. So, and then after a few weeks in there, Mick said, "Right, we're going to move into the proper studio." And Keith and I just sat down and I said, "Why should we move? It sounds amazing in here." And Keith said, "Yeah, you're right. Let's stay in here." So we stayed in that room forever. I mean, we spent, I think over Some Girls and Emotional Rescue and bits of Undercover. Wow, we must have spent maybe 3 years in that studio. Not every day, but I mean, we go out for months at a time. So, yeah.
The music on Some Girls, people talk about it as being that sort of influenced by punk and the times, but them being in a little room, looking at each other, playing live music, must have also helped shape that sound.
Oh, absolutely. But also what shaped that album, I think, is there was an incredible pressure on the band the fact that Keith, his court case was still impending in Canada, and this might be the last album they get to record because he might go down. So there was a lot of pressure on Mick and the rest of the. Keith was still, he had his heroin habit, so he was kind of, not oblivious to that, but he was kind of shutting himself away from that. And Mick was very gracious in supporting Keith through, helping him understanding that issue as well. Not only the issue of the bus, but also the issue of, his addiction as well.
Their future.
Yeah. So I mean, hats off to Mick for kind of guiding, people through that time. And that's when Mick Mick's energy is really full on.
Yeah.
And that's when his energy kind of came into more of the creative part. He was writing more than Keith at the time. That's the first time Mick had really picked up an electric guitar and was playing with the band. I mean, to the shock and horror of Keith and Ronnie at the time.
But I don't think that's so much in terms of him like picking up the reins to be the leader. It's more helping Keith sound
exactly.
A little bit.
No, exactly that. No, completely that. Yeah. Mick's guitar play is very brash. It's very, it's full of energy and testosterone. So, that created a certain element in the sound of that record for sure.
And how about the way that they worked at the time? Because they like to run through stuff. Was it a different mode to what you'd been used to earlier with them?
No, not really. In fact, it's maybe a longer process because all of the writing was done in the studio. Right. I mean, they come in and, Mick would have a riff and an idea, Keith would have something, and then it would work through it. So you'd hear the same song for maybe like 10 days, and then you'd really get a feel onto something's going to happen. This is going to be good. So you had to make sure you're recording.
Yeah, you're recording everything.
Not everything, but pretty much everything. I mean, and also a lot of jamming would go on. My knowledge of old blues wasn't very good, and they'd often crack into some fantastic old blues. I'd say, "Oh, I love that song. You got to use that one." They look at me and they know that's a cover. That's we don't want that. So, but yeah, some amazing playing going on for that.
I remember Andrew Oldham's telling me that studio time was money in the 60s. So you record the song, you move on to the next one. But if you've got all this time and money that you can play whatever you want, I suppose you have to be then ready to recognise the magic.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I made fastidious notebooks on all of those sessions. And that's how we were able to go back later years and find, some gems that the band had kind of disregarded and forgotten about and didn't put on albums at the time.
Yeah, well, I suppose the most famous one is
Tattoo You.
Yeah, well, the song they were playing was Never Stop.
Oh.
During the Some Girls.
Yeah, Start Me Up.
And that's a song that was probably played dozens of times.
Yeah. Well, it's a reggae song as well originally.
Yeah.
That's how it started. So, that was so. There was a wealth of material kind of hanging about that hadn't been used from what I'd recorded with them, and knowing that when Rupert Lowenstein, the manager, said to me, Kimsey, he said we need to get another album, but Mick and Keith's relationship wasn't very hot at the time. He said, I don't think we're going to get them in the studio. So, do you know of any songs that? I said, well, yeah, I know of songs that I've recorded that weren't used. I said, if I've got 6 or 7, there must be even more back in the vault. So I went through and spent like 3 months going through everything, and found Waiting on a Friend from Goat's Head Soup and quite a few other songs as well. So
with Start Me Up, is it true that Keith wasn't enamoured by the final version?
No. When that got cut, he came in and they came in and listened, and Keith said, "No, don't like it. Get rid of it." I mean, it's like, well, I wouldn't get rid of anything.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So was he just too used to the reggae version, or was it more? Like
I think he was used to the reggae version as well, and I vaguely remember him saying that I've heard something like that on the radio or something. I think he felt that he'd heard it before, but he didn't hear it before. He just dreamt he'd heard it before.
You were also personally involved in some of the songs. I believe Mick sort of gave you carte blanche to edit Some Girls.
Oh yes, the title track from the Some Girls album. Yeah, I mean when that went down, there was one take, which was very long. It's about 19 minutes, I think. And the reason it was so long is that Mick just had so many verses about so many girls. and so it was like verse after verse after verse after verse. The bridge only came up in that 20 minutes, 19 minutes. The bridge only came up maybe twice. And we had a playback of that long version. And everyone agreed it was a great feel, fantastic. And Mick said, can you, use that, but edit it down to like 4 minutes. So I went, 4.5 minutes. I said, right, okay, what verses? He said, you choose. So I just picked, the verses and stuck it all together. But what was quite incredible was that, and this is something that I pass on to students at uni if I'm teaching, is that students come in and the first thing they want is a click. They grid on Pro Tools so everything's in time. Back then we didn't have a click, no clicks at all. In fact, most of the great records don't have clicks, and the reason they're great is because they move in time as well.
But also you don't need a click if you've got Charlie Watts.
Well, no, exactly that. So I was just amazed I could take something from like 16 minutes and pretty much put it after 30 seconds of the beginning of Some Girls, and it would all be, the timing would be perfect.
That's incredible.
Charlie's timing was just incredible. So, to be able to edit anything I wanted to anywhere was a dream. It was really a dream. But it was really fiddly, editing 16 track with a razor blade. You'd have to put up the verses, stick them to the wall, and then kind of insert them where you wanted. Sometimes I'd put it upside down so the verse would be played backwards, which was quite novel. But it's tape's quite resilient in that way. You can, even if you mess up an edit, you can put it back together again and re-edit it. So up to a point. So,
but that's an album that really kind of packs a sonic punch. Were you pleased with the way it came out?
Oh, incredibly pleased. I mean, one of my favourite albums to this day, and sonically the way it's recorded was fantastic. But that was a lot to do with that console, and it's really interesting because sitting behind the board for hours and hours listening to the band play the same song over and over again, you never know when the magic take's going to happen. But I'm like twiddling on the knob. I'm trying a compressor on this, on the drums, and twiddling with the EQ. So, you never know if when you're in the middle of changing something, if that's going to be in the master. But it never was. But I think it got to a point where I was fine tuning the sound all the time because they were going through it so much, and it enabled me to really discover what this console could do. So it was great fun.
A couple of years later, you're in Nassau for what would become Emotional Rescue.
Yeah.
Was that a different vibe, different environment, different atmosphere?
Yes, it was a different atmosphere. I mean, the studio was so much smaller, and very, very not a nice room to record the band in. Actually, quite a difficult room. It was a small room, wasn't very live. I can't remember the console. I know the console was good. I think also trying to keep the band together over there was a little more difficult. Well, it's difficult, and the only place that was really easy to keep the band in one place was when we did Steel Wheels in Montserrat.
Yeah,
because there wasn't too many social functions for anyone to go to and distractions. Yeah. The great thing about Montserrat actually was Keith said, okay, we're working Monday through Friday, we're having the weekends off for barbecues. I think mainly because his family was out there with him. He was with Patty at the time, and the family, which was great because we all needed that. It was a wonderful, situation actually, being in Montserrat with them. It was really good.
What's been served at a Keith Richards barbecue?
Burnt chicken. Yeah. Actually burnt because Ronnie and I were late back to the barbecue. We got told off.
Sonically, in terms of Emotional Rescue, I mean, the Stones always sounded off their time. They were always contemporary and modern, but here is where they start sort of pulling other styles. There's a bit of funk and disco going on. From that kind of perspective, were you aware that you could see them evolving?
Yeah, but also it gave me a chance to evolve in the sound as well. I mean, especially with Emotional Rescue as well with mixed high falsetto.
Yep.
And the other music that I loved as a kid was ska. I mean, I was a member of a ska club down in Surbiton. I loved ska music, and what attracted me to that was obviously the bass, but also in the clubs I couldn't figure out how they could, they could just turn the vocal off. and bring it in and out. Well, it was because they were playing a stereo record. On one side was the vocal, and the other side was the rhythm section. So it was as simple as that.
It's cutting it out.
But yeah, so that fascinated me at the time. But so my ear was always, if there was anything that was going that way, I go, oh, I like this. So kind of almost like the Jamaican attitude in mixing that with the echo delays on mixed voice and stuff, just all of it. That was a very different song and record, that one. It was quite interesting, Emotional Rescue. And it was really, I think it was great that it got so high in the charts as well, because it was very, very different.
Now, there's a great story about in Nassau, Keith was doing a cover of Sam Cooke's song "Let's Go Steady Again."
Oh yes,
and he wanted a female voice on
it. That's right. Yeah, that's right. That was in Nassau, and that was funny actually, because Keith had heard Christy, my wife, sing in Paris, because she was doing. She used to do radio jingles for RTF, I think it was called, but also because she'd met Lee Halliday, the producer of Johnny Halliday. When we were first going out, Lee knew she had a great voice, so he asked her to come and sing on this kind of disco album, which was called Love Train, which was quite amazing. The French were so good at imitating American kind of R&B sections and fiddly sound, and the bass player was incredible, I remember, and the string arrangements. So she sang on this disco album about travelling through Europe on a train, the Love Train. A lot of it was like covers on, Never on a Sunday, the Arrivederci Roma, that type of thing, but with a disco beat and arrangement. It was really quite cool. So he'd heard her voice then, and he'd heard her sing around just on, in the control room as well. And so I remember I got back from the session one night, and she said, Keith just called me. I said, oh, he did? She said, yeah, he wanted me to come on sing on this song. I said, oh, well, why didn't he? She said, well, it's 2:00 in the morning. I was asleep. I'm in bed. So I told him, no, I'll come and do it tomorrow. So anyway, the next day we did do it, and it was a great, great version. And what was kind of magical for her was that, she's singing there with Keith, one microphone, duet, and only did 2 takes, and that was it. It was done. It was brilliant. And I think Bobby was on that. That was a really special moment for her. And it was just great that Keith Arthur's a step up and sing.
Absolutely, what an honour.
Yeah.
I mean, it's available on bootlegs, but it's never been
officially
released.
It was released. It was released because Christy, she released her own album that we actually recorded in 1979. We found all this during lockdown. We found all the tapes. So I spent ages mastering it and getting it into shape, and obviously we had that duet with Keith. So I did ask Keith, can we release it on Christy's album? So he said yes, you can. So
that's fantastic.
It was officially released, which was really quite special. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about Prince Rupert saying to look for tracks. Now this is obviously because things have kind of deteriorated in the Stones camp. They're after an album.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple of times when that happened. The worst time for me was when I was trying to finish Undercover, because we were in New York at that time, and Mick and Keith were not talking, and actually got to the point where it was very stressful. Well, not stressful, but very time demanding for me, because Mick would only come in from like 1:00 until 6:00, and Keith would only come in from like 8:00 until 4:00 in the morning the next day. So I was, in the studio for like 18 hours a day. It was quite exhausting, and I could never get them in the same room together. They just wouldn't do it. And I'm
so
trying
they're both still committed, but just on their own. Timeline.
Exactly. And I was trying to get this album finished. So there was when it came time to start mixing, I had a vision of how Undercover could sound. Mm-hmm. Because Undercover was recorded in a very strange way. I mean, essentially it was recorded with Charlie playing timpani, because it was recorded at Patty Marconi, Charlie playing timpani, and I can't remember if it was Mick or Keith on acoustic guitar, but that's how it went down, the initial track. Never before we'd recorded anything like that. So it was built and added to as we went along. When it came to mixing it, I just had this really kind of definite kind of vision. I think I was being influenced a lot by MTV at the time. because MTV was is at its peak then.
Yeah.
By what you could see and hear on MTV was very interesting, and also it was maybe the end or there was something about disco and reggae that I just had this image of my mind of what I wanted the song to sound like. So in mixing it, it was a really, I mean, if we'd ever had digital, could have done it in couple of days. It took me a week to mix that track because it was there's a place where you got backwards guitars, start and stopping, everything like that, and that was just by stopping the tape machine, getting the delay to carry on, editing it in, a lot of tricky editing going in on that song, and also quite a lot of, there was a thing called a harmonizer that had just been created, which you could put vocal, you could put anything through it, but I put the vocal through on that, and mixed voice was tumbling down in octaves in that. So it was quite a pastiche, and when I managed to get the two of them at Hit Factory to listen to it back, they both looked, they said, wow, that's fucking great, mix the rest of the album like that. Well, nothing else on that album, kind of the song didn't really, direct me to do it like that. Everything was a bit more traditional in a way. So that was a difficult album to make, and after that I was becoming really busy with a lot of other productions and recordings, and what was the Dirty Work, that was the next album I think, and I wasn't available to do that. Steve Lillywhite did that album, and I think they were at their lowest kind of friendship during the end of Undercover, and Dirty Work I know was a difficult album to make as well. So I'm glad that I managed to avoid that.
Yeah, you got some distance in that period.
Distance,
I mean, it's amazing that Tattoo You was kind of brought together, and yet it's such a cohesive album.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's celebrated as being, almost one of their last great albums of that period.
I know, it's quite amazing. I mean, it really is amazing. And hats off to, I mixed some of that, and Bob Clearmountain mixed a lot of it too. And hats off to Bob, because he did a great job of correlating, making it sound like one thing. And the great thing about that album also was that we had the fast side and the slow side.
Yeah.
And I think that came up just by accident. I think in put in a demonstration of the mixes to the band, and it just happened. Wow, that's really cool. It worked really well.
The kind of success of that almost overshadowed the Undercover, which came later.
Yeah.
There was some criticism of it.
Yeah.
There was some criticism was talking about the sound work on it, the production side of it. I mean, it obviously wasn't something that he held against you, because you come back later on for Steel Wheels.
Yeah.
Were you kind of pissed off at all that the sound was being pointed at?
No, I don't take, I don't look at reviews or anything to do with that. I mean, if I want to complain about sound, I can complain about how albums are remastered, and they turn up sounding like absolute shit because they're compressed to death. Loudness wars. I mean, that happened with some girls, and fortunately I was able to point it out to the band at one point, and so it got changed. But so no, I don't really, follow trends. I think if that's what was said, it's more likely because the tensions between the musicians were so high, and the quality of songs would have deteriorated as well. I mean, that's what, when I was asked to come back and do Steel Wheels, it was a situation where none of us wanted to go in a studio with no material and sit around for 6 months writing and recording. So it was a conscious decision that Mick and Keith would go off and write together. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was good that they were getting back together as well, and doing what they do best. So that really helped that album. They were in Eddie Grant's studio in Barbados writing together, and just ironically, I was working in Montserrat with Anderson, Wakeford, Bruford, and Howe at the time. So I would go over the weekends to see how they were getting on, and then when we came to recording Steel Wheels at Montserrat, it was kind of a very focused album. We knew what songs we were going to record.
And didn't you have a bit of a clear vision of what you wanted to do
with
them?
Sonically, because I'd been through so many different kind of areas of sonic sound with the band, I really wanted to make Steel Wheels sound pretty cinematic, pretty not lush, but very detailed, and very clear sounding, not trashy, not garagey, not punky, nothing like some girls, the complete opposite to some girls.
Well, this is the 80s now, right?
Yes, yeah, but yeah, and the reason I wanted to do that, because I was thinking ahead, because I wanted to do that with Steel Wheels, and the next album I wanted to do the opposite and get it like Exile on Main Street. I wanted to create something really, funky and dirty, and raw. I never got that opportunity, unfortunately, because Mick decided to change record labels and producers, which is fine. But Steel Wheels, I'm very proud of that album as well. In fact, when we were talking about Bernard earlier, Bernard was so pivotal in the backing vocals on the song Mixed Emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, he was such a great arranger of backing vocals. And on that album in particular, there's a lot of backing vocals, and not just one or two. I mean, it's harmonic. A lot of harmonies going on. So
there's fresh blood in the band at that point. Yeah. Not only is it Mick and Keith coming together, you've got Bernard. Chuck Leavell's been in the band a few years, Lisa Fisher, Sarah Dash.
Yeah.
So it all must have kept people on their toes as well.
And also Matt Clifford, because I introduced Matt Clifford to Mick.
That's right, yeah.
Because Matt I met when I was working with Anderson, Wakeford, Booth and Howe in Montserrat. Matt was John Anderson's. Matt would help John in the writing process. He was a programmer, and he was a great keyboard player, but he was more in helping John in creating demos, or at least we're in digital land now, in arranging songs. So after a couple of visits to Montserrat to see Mick and Keith, to Barbados to see how Mick and Keith were getting on with the writing, I kind of felt that they needed another musician there. A keyboard player would be great. Matt's kind of work had finished pretty much in Montserrat, so I said to Matt, I'm taking you to meet Mick and Keith next week. It's like, oh shit, really? And it worked out perfect. I mean, Matt and Mick are still best friends to this day, and then I mean really good friends.
Yeah.
It's difficult for someone like Mick to have really close friends. I think any huge star, but they are very good friends, and Matt's been with Mick ever since. It's quite turned into quite a friendship.
Absolutely, he's still hanging around.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt's terrific. So and then he got to play live with him as well, part of the band. So that was quite an introduction. I mean, I think that's what producers do. You introduce musicians to other musicians, hoping they're going to connect and keep something happening. So
Steel Wheels was, of course, Bill Wyman's last Stones album.
Dear Bill. I mean, I'm still in touch with Bill. I mean, Bill, phenomenal bass player. I love Bill's bass playing. I'll never forget. It was on Some Girls, and I can't remember which song it was. It wasn't Miss You for sure, because I was with Bill. Bill used to go to a club called Regine's some nights, and he'd invite me down sometime. It was all kind of disco stuff. It was pretty cool, French disco, and that kind of filtered through to Miss You in Bill's bass part on that, for sure. I mean, what a great bass part. He was such an innovative bass guitar player. He was terrific. But I'll never forget, there was one song, and Mick is trying to rehearse his song, and Mick's going up to Bill to talk about the bass part. But Mick's way of explaining what he wanted to hear was like, he wasn't singing any notes. He was more, it's almost like he was like not spitting in Bill's ear, but he was like, stuff like that. And Bill was looking at me like going, yeah, but still playing the same thing he'd been playing for the last half an hour. So it's quite funny.
Well, let's take this opportunity then to sort of speak about the musicality of each of the musicians in the Stones.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you kind of respect each of them most for?
I respected them as a total entity, that they really understood and taught me about, as a collective group of musicians playing together, when all the parts come into play, because a lot of musicians can overplay, and it's like what you don't play is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And they were masters. They are masters at that, I feel. And just feeling that and seeing that happen was quite special. It was very, very rare that we ever overdubbed any guitars on any of the tracks. And if we did, it was usually Ronnie who would overdub a solo, because maybe he was playing rhythm guitar with two rhythm guitars and needed a solo. But it was all pretty much, all went down in one take, which was great too. Get into that take, that was a bit of a journey. But also what was really wonderful working with Keith and Ronnie is they were, especially Keith was very open to me fiddling about with guitar sounds as well, because there was a new pedal that came out, an MXR digital delay, which plugged in, and that ended up being shattered. That was the guitar sound on that. And also they were using these new amps at the time called Boogie amplifiers, which were quite tricky. They had so many different combinations of knobs on them, push, pull for volume, overdrive. You could really get a bad sound, quite easy to get a bad sound. But fortunately, it came with like a template. So I just went out and like set a template up, and then we crank it up a bit louder or whatever. So and then those amps became de facto, and Mick and Ronnie used those a lot. They were good amps for them, great sound. So that was nice. And Ronnie playing pedal steel as well.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. Yeah, I mean, really, just the two of those guitar players working together was quite special. I mean, it was with Mick Taylor. Mick Taylor was a very different guitar player, though, but Keith and Ronnie, I like the way they weave together, for sure. Yeah.
So Ronnie let you tinker with his amps, but I believe you once got in trouble from Charlie for tinkering with his drums.
Yes, because I'd get to the sessions. I was always the first one there, and one evening I remember sitting down at Charlie's drum kit, just playing the drums, listening to him, and I thought, oh yeah, the snare sounds a little bit. I'm just going to tune it up just a little bit, not a lot, but just it must have dropped because we've been there weeks and weeks. And two things amazed me actually. One was like I was looking at the rim of the drum, and this is in the 80s, and I could see confetti, and it was confetti from the Hyde Park concert.
Right.
I don't know how many years before for Brian Jones. It was the same drum head. I mean, Charlie never changed his drum heads.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I did get a call from him before we started Steel Wheels. He said, Chris, I got to tell you, you've got to put some more money in the budget. I'm changing my drum heads. I went, oh my God. So I'd tinkered with his snare drum just to, quarter turn. And when he came in that night, he sat down at his drums and he started to play the snare drum and kind of stopped in horror. And he looked up, he said, someone's touched my drums. I said, yeah, that was me. I said, I just had a little tweet. He said, oh, okay, fine. But it was amazing that that's tiny change that he could feel that. And that's because he was such a delicate drummer. He's a jazz drummer at heart. Yeah. So his touch was so important. And obviously it wasn't the bounce back that he was used to. So that was really another interesting learning curve for sure.
You said that you'd had a vision for what you would have liked to have done after Steel
Wheels. Yeah.
The next time you worked with the Stones was recording some of the live stuff for Stripped.
Oh yeah, that was great fun.
Was the fact that album was like semi-acoustic, was that a bit of a vindication on your part that you thought, well, I quite like the idea of you doing that?
No, I don't think so. But it's quite interesting. And that was at Brixton, wasn't it? Yeah. So because I think Dom produced the rest of the album, or recorded the rest of the album, but he couldn't make those shows or something, so they asked me to step in and do it. But what was great, I mean, because I knew the songs so well, I mean, I put down mixes as I was recording it, and Pierre, Keith's guitar tech, called me up months later. He said, Chris, I prefer your mixes to what actually went on the album. He said, your mixes were amazing. And that was just live, because it was like a live mix doing it as it was going down. That was I really enjoyed recording that. That was fantastic. So, yeah, that was good.
I think it says on your website you've been involved in more than 750 albums. What is it you're most proud of in terms of your input into these albums?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact I lasted with the Stones for so long and did come up with some very creative sonic, sound productions for them. And the special thing about working with them, there was never any egos about the production or the sound. It was about how you captured it and how you got on with it, really. And that was quite a special thing. And also linking in to my love of reggae with Keith was quite a lovely moment as well. Very proud of that, and very proud of working with Peter Frampton on so many albums as well. That I think between Peter and the Stones, I think I've done maybe 7 albums with each of them in total. different different live albums and so forth. So that's been a wonderful achievement. I've just been very blessed with. I've always been able to kind of choose the artists that I'm allowed to work with, or they've come to me. And I mean, working with Meridian was fantastic. I loved working with them, and going to Hansa Studios with Killing Joke as well. Love Killing Joke. Still in touch with all these people. Duran Duran here at Olympic. That was terrific. So I've been very lucky to work with so many. I can count on one hand, maybe two fingers, artists that I hated working with. I won't mention them, but if it wasn't working, I'd just leave. I'd say, you get on with it. It's not.
Is there anybody you turned down that you regret?
I almost turned down INXS because when I got the songs, this is for Full Moon and Dirty Hearts. When I got the songs, I didn't realise this, but they were actually studio recordings that they'd done with another producer, and they weren't happy with them, or they wanted someone to help finish the album. And when I got them, I said, "Well, these are all crap. The songs aren't there. You've got to write some more." And they were horrified. They did write some more, but not a lot more. No, I've been very blessed with them who I've been worked with, and quite diverse as well.
Absolutely.
That's been really, really special and fortunate, because I, strangely enough, working so much with the Stones, I always get kind of labelled as the rock producer engineer, but I like any music,
Yeah.
I particularly like reggae. I mean, I had such a good time working with Jimmy Cliff.
Who we just lost.
I know, very, very sad. He was a wonderful human being. And working with Peter Tosh as well. And being in Jamaica, working, because my love of ska records, when I got there and recorded with them, all of a sudden it was so apparent how these records were made. I mean, and the sound of the drums, it's because they didn't have any microphones. It was so limited. You couldn't have a microphone over the cymbal or over the top of the drums. You just had mics for the drums themselves. And so all the cymbal, all the high end would come in through those mics.
Yeah.
And creating a very dark but powerful sound. So it was amazing. I loved it. Part of my life, really special.
And you are still working today, but of course, music's being consumed in different ways now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I tend to work in working with younger artists, helping them in getting their recordings done. I've got a lot of opportunities with studios where I can help younger artists for not a lot of money, so that's really good to help them. But then also, I'm working with some very high-profile artists as well. Who give me, the chance to work with string sections. I did a great album with an artist called Noah Francis a few years ago, where I'd always wanted to make a soul record with strings and horns on every track, and that opportunity came up. The album's not out yet. I think it might be out next year. And one of my favourite string arrangers has always been Tony Visconti. So I met with Tony before I asked him to do this string arrangement job, because he helped build the studio at Kingston University, and he was teaching there for a while, and I plugged in with that whole team and did some master classes there, which was really quite wonderful, because they have analog there, so I'll only teach anywhere if they have analog, because I think that's, you've got to start there.
Yeah.
With the discipline that I was talking about earlier, really helps. So I called up Tony and sent him the tracks. He said, I'd love to do this. And that was quite a special moment. We recorded all the string arrangements at Air Lyndhurst. That was a great session. And then the horns, I managed to get the nephew of Sonny Rollins to play on. So we went to Harlem to see him, and then we recorded the horns in New York.
It's another Stones link there.
Yeah. Well, actually, Keith was on the show that night. We went to see them. It was the Harlem Awards, I think. I remember Mary Clayton was given an award, and Keith came on and played, and he was so nervous. It was fantastic. He was just so honoured to be there. Yeah, but it was fantastic. So.
And has streaming and the digital consumption of music changed the way in which you're working if you're not working on analog?
No, I mean, I embraced digital when it first came along. I still like to record on analog if I get the opportunity, but I'm not. I kind of treat digital recording like analog, really. It's definitely more productive in a workflow, especially for mixing, and also it has helped in so much as unless you really want to keep a complete analog path, I can mix in my studio at home, which is great, for budget reasons, because it's almost like a class difference has happened within the recording community of like the people that have the money, that have the opportunity, but there's so many musicians who don't have the opportunity, who should have the opportunity, because they're really good musicians and singers. I mean, I see a lot of artists who really should have more of a break, and it really is about getting breaks at the right time and being in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
Especially with the fact that now a lot of the money is coming from touring and gigging, so to get on an opening slot with someone big really helps you. So
it does, yeah.
That's really important. So no, I'm still out there kind of supporting that and helping artists and working with some incredible musicians. What I tend to do is, if I find a great musician, I'll try and plug those in to the sessions that I'm recording for the artists, who have a big budget, so they can pay them, and also get them into the band possibly as
Absolutely,
well.
yeah.
Because that always happens too.
And I believe you've been writing a book. Is it an autobiography?
Well, yeah. I haven't got very far with that, but I will put pen to paper. I've done a little bit, but I think with the presentations I'm doing, the speaking presentations I'm doing more, I'm collecting everything a bit more. So, but it'll be a really interesting book, because my family say I have to do it, because my experience, my career has been, I think it's been very different in so much as a lot of my stories are very human stories about the journey of working together with a group of artists, not so much about the technical side, but about the friendship, and also how you get to these points and what you go through. Mm-hmm. I mean, because being a producer, you're a bit of a psychologist as well. I mean, there's a lot of mind work going on, and you have to support these people in such a way to keep their creativity going. It's quite, I mean, my life's too short. I know, I've got so much more to do.
Absolutely, got to fit it all in.
So, yeah.
Well, let's finish then with 5 quick fire questions, 5 by 5.
Yep.
Same questions I ask everybody.
Okay.
What is your favourite Rolling Stones song?
Oh, that is really difficult. There's too many. Beast of Burden comes to mind. I mean, I think, because I'm attached to the stuff that I've recorded, so naturally. But that particular, because I can just remember that track going down that night in Paris, and it was just quite magical. And just the lyrics of it all, it kind of was saying it all about, what it could be being like, in that band. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's I love that song.
Well, I think I might know the answer to this one then, but what's your favourite Rolling Stones album?
Ooh, that's a difficult one too. Actually, it's Let It Bleed. I love that album. Yeah, I really love the songs on that, and I love Nicky Hopkins on that album too. He's amazing on that album. I think that's my favourite album, and maybe that's because I knew that album before. I knew that album musically before I really met them and worked with them. So
you can appreciate it.
It holds a different place in my heart, as it were. Yeah.
Is there a deep cut or underrated Stones track that you feel deserves more love?
Well, there's a couple that haven't come out yet, and I don't think they ever will. There's one track that is like, to me, it's like an opus, and I've talked about this, trying to get it done, but no one seems to be interested. But it's about 20 minutes long, and it's almost like it would be like Papa Was a Rolling Stone. It's like that kind of vibe. It's a really cool song. So, but I can't see it seeing the light of day, because I had presented it, but it fell on deaf ears. So,
maybe one day.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What is it that you think makes the Stones such an influential and enduring band?
Enduring? Well, what else are they going to do? I mean, it's the same story for any musician, really. I mean, that is your life. That is same for me. What am I going to do? I mean, just want to be recording and mixing music until I can't hear or my fingers don't work anymore. I think it's the same with any musician. You know, you have that love. I mean, can you imagine being on stage? I wonder how many times the Stones have walked on a stage. I mean, because that whole experience, that whole adrenaline, that whole thing that happens when you perform. It doesn't matter if you're performing in front of 100 or 100,000. It's still that that same feeling of going on stage, and that I've not performed on stage, so I don't know what that feeling is, but it must be amazing. And to stop doing that, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, that's almost like when you're told, well, you can't drive a car anymore. It's like, oh shit, So, but you can take the bus, I suppose, or the train. But so
I couldn't see Keith Richards on the bus.
Well, no, but you can see Ronnie Wood on the tube, because he did take the tube to the O2 a few months ago. I remember people posting photos. Yeah, that was funny. But Mick has such a drive and energy about him, whether it's music related, business related, whatever it is. But Mick is that driving force. So that will always be at the tip. And Keith just wants and needs to play. So it's the perfect marriage in that respect.
Finally, if you could describe the Rolling Stones in just 3 words, what would they be?
Well, they're definitely fun. They're definitely fun to work with. They're definitely passionate to work with. And they're definitely rewarding to work with.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you very much, Simon. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for listening. That concludes Season 1 of Lip Service. As I mentioned earlier, all 12 episodes are available to stream or download wherever you get your podcasts. If the series has meant something to you, a follow, rating or review makes a real difference in helping it reach new listeners. Season 2 is already taking shape, so Lip Service will return later in the year. In the meantime, you'll find extra content and other Stones related stuff on our socials, where you'll find us everywhere at Stones Lip Pod. Please join us there as the journey continues and the Stones keep rolling. Till the next time, we say goodbye.